Welcome. This video serves as an introduction to basic economic principles. As a new student of economics, you may be wondering why you should study economics. Many people assume incorrectly that economics is about money or how to make money or is about how to invest in the stock market. Though economics definitely touches on these topics, it enables us to explore a wide range of different issues. For instance, economics answers questions such as why do Americans enjoy a higher standard of living than the vast majority of people around the world? Is the world going to run out of oil? Does the minimum wage help the poor? What caused the last recession in the United States, which we call the Great Recession? Why did the city of Santa Clara, California just build a new stadium for the 49ers? Would slavery have ended naturally without the Civil War? Do we benefit from trade with China? Economics can be used to explore the effects of government policies. When in designing government policy, it's not enough to have good intentions. Well-intended government policies often have devastating unintended consequences. For instance, in the early 1970s, U.S. President Richard Nixon imposed price controls on gasoline. Rather than making inexpensive gasoline available for Americans, the policy caused shortages and long waiting lines at the pump. These were the unintended consequences of government policy. Surprisingly, in the early 1970s when this happened, economists already understood the economic principles that explain why price controls lead to shortages. In fact, these are principles that are taught in basic introductory economics courses. Another example might be the long bread lines that existed in Soviet Russia. In Soviet Russia, the Constitution guaranteed everyone a certain amount of essential things like bread and housing. Ironically, in America, where the Constitution did not make such guarantees, the people were able to buy inexpensive bread rather than waiting in long lines like they had to do in Russia. When future president of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, visited America, he was infinitely more impressed by what he saw in our supermarkets than by any of our tourist attractions like the Statue of Liberty. He truly marveled over the great variety of products he saw in the first supermarket he visited in Houston, Texas. What he saw was beyond the imagination of most Soviets, but yet easily accessible to common Americans without having to stand in long lines. Once again, basic economic principles are at play. British economist Lionel Robbins gave the following definition of economics. Economics is the study of the use of scarce resources, which have alternative uses. Scarcity is an important feature of any good definition of economics. To better understand why scarcity is an important part of a good definition of economics, I want to introduce you to Bob. Bob is trying to decide what he should do with his morning. He could go running, he could sleep in, or he could read a good book. Now, obviously, Bob can't do all three of these things at once. If he spends his morning running, he's not spending his morning sleeping in or reading a good book. Or if he sleeps in, he's not also reading a good book or going running. So this is what we mean by scarcity. Because of scarcity, we face trade-offs. Bob can't do all three things because his time is scarce. He has to choose just one of them. He has to make a choice. So this is what we mean by scarcity. Scarcity implies that we face trade-offs, that we have to make choices. And the fact that we face trade-offs and have to make a choice, that gives us costs. That's why there's cost in the world. Every time we make a choice, we incur a cost. To better understand this, let's suppose that Bob's most preferred choice, what he'd most like to do, is go running. His second best alternative is reading a good book. And his least preferred choice is sleeping in. If this is Bob's preference ranking, if this shows what he would most like to do, it's quite obvious that Bob, well, he's going to spend his scarce time in the morning going running. But when he goes running, he incurred an opportunity cost, which is the value of the next best alternative. When he chose to go running, he gave up the opportunity to read a good book, which is his second best choice. Now, is sleeping in also part of the opportunity cost of going running? Didn't he give up reading a good book and also sleeping in? Well, since his time is scarce, he could have chosen only one of those alternatives. He couldn't have read a good book and slept in at the same time. He had to choose just one of them. So the opportunity cost of going running is just his next best alternative. Okay, we're not going to count the third or the fourth or his least preferred choice as part of the opportunity cost. We're focusing in on what is the next best alternative. So, because of scarcity, we face trade-offs, have to make choices, and every time we face one of these trade-offs and make a choice, we incur an opportunity cost, the value of the next best alternative. To better understand this, let's consider a policy application that many Americans are wrestling with at this time: free health care for all. Can health care really ever be free? To better understand this, I want to introduce you to Jane. She is trying to decide what to be when she grows up. She has pretty much decided on being a doctor. However, she is also considered being an aeronautical engineer. Even though Jane is amazing, she cannot do both. She must choose. What is the opportunity cost of being a doctor? That's right. It's becoming an aeronautical engineer. But is this really a cost? Absolutely. If Jane becomes a doctor, there will be less aeronautical engineering services available in the nation and even the world. Even if the government successfully forced Jane to provide medical care free of charge, the fact remains that society would have less aeronautical services available. Jane may have designed a safer airplane that would have saved thousands of lives in less crashes had she not become a doctor. In a society where Jane is able to choose what she wants to be, she is not likely to become a doctor unless the pay is at least as much as she would earn as an aeronautical engineer. For Jane, the opportunity cost of becoming a doctor is the salary she would have earned as an aeronautical engineer. This is what she gives up to be a doctor. This is one of the reasons why doctors make as much as they do. We must pay them enough to cover their opportunity cost. That is, we must pay them at least as much as they would make in their next best alternative employment. So again, even if Jane was convinced to provide doctor services for free, to me perhaps, to make it personal, or to you, well, we would have benefited from her talents being used as an aeronautical engineer if she had decided to do that. So by becoming a doctor, well, we give up as society the opportunity to have the benefits of her being an aeronautical engineer. In the next video, we will explore this topic of opportunity cost in much more detail.